Hello and welcome to our webinar. Ireland commits to remanufactured notebooks. Why? And will Europe follow? I'm your host, Steve Haskew, Group Director of Sustainability and Growth here at Circular Computing. In this webinar, we'll be exploring what the drivers for the Office of Government Procurement was to deliver a framework which includes the use of remanufactured notebooks. We'll also explore how this will help Ireland achieve its environmental objectives. The audience today is made up of IT professionals and sustainability experts from Ireland and further afield in Europe. So welcome to you all and thank you for attending, and a happy budget day to those in Ireland. Right, so before we get started, I'd like to go through a few items with you so you know how to get maximum value from the session today. My discussion with two key leads, one at the Office of Government Procurement and the other in Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, will take roughly 30 or 40 minutes with a 10-minute Q&A at the end. Your audio and video will be disabled during the session. You'll be able to send questions in the chat to today's guests at any time during the webinar via the Q&A tab. We'll address as many of these as we possibly can at the Q&A at the end. We'll also be taking a few polls during the session to gauge your position on your own sustainability journey. When it's launched, we'll be posting a link to our Mentimeter poll in the chat box. And I would urge you to click and join in if you can. This webinar will be recorded and will be distributed to all in attendance today in the next few working days following the webinar. So now I'm delighted to introduce our guest speakers, Fergal Ryan, Principal Officer of the Office of Government Procurement, the OGP, and Niall McLaughlin, Principal Officer, Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications, DEC. Fergal, could you do us a favour, introduce yourself, what you do, and share a roundup of your career highlights?
Morning, Steve. I certainly can. I am recently, I guess only over the last few months, I've taken over the position of Portfolio Manager, which is a principal level, for the ICT portfolio within the Office of Government Procurement. We procure common goods and services in the ICT area, most notably, and I guess most relevant for today, desktop and notebook computers, and particularly notebook computers or laptops. I've been in the OGP since 2018. Prior to that, I spent 33 years in the private sector, and I've always been tinkering around with technology, between being a network technician, software engineer, project and program manager, and then more recently, since 2010, I've been involved in ICT procurement. So I guess a long IT-related road over the last 40 years of my career. And I think it's honestly safe to say, I was just talking about this with my team earlier on today, and it's safe to say that actually being part of the team that put this new remanufactured notebook framework in place is actually one of the career highlights. I've had a number, but this is definitely the most recent one. And from an environmental point of view, it's definitely the most significant one.
Fantastic. And Niall, maybe you could give us an introduction to who you are and what you do, and highlights in your career.
Thanks, Steve, and good morning, everybody. My name is Niall McLaughlin. I'm the principal of the Circular Economy Strategic Policy Division here in DEC. There's a broad range of responsibilities that comes with that role, including circular economy legislation, Ireland's circular economy strategies, green public procurement, reuse repair initiatives, and the Circular Economy Innovation Grant Scheme. So I've been in this post for about 8 months, and prior to that I was the principal here in DEC with responsibility for EU international air quality and SDGs, where among other roles, I suppose, if you're looking for highlights, I guess I led out on Ireland's participation at the annual climate conferences, or COPs as they're more commonly known. I led out in Glasgow, Sharm el-Sheikh and Dubai, but I won't be packing my bags for Baku this November. Steve, happily ensconced now in the circular economy world. Thanks.
So between you, you've had close on to 100 years in industry and government. Fergal, is there an alliance or sort of a similarity to working industry side, working public sector side? Are you seeing things move more quickly in the public sector side, perhaps?
I wouldn't say so, Steve. No, to be honest with you, things in the public sector take time. We're never at the leading or bleeding edge of technology, typically, and things generally take time. But certainly by comparison with the private sector where I was working as an ICT consumer, I have to say, although I did work for a telco as well, which was where we were providing the technology as well. But It is, I guess, and the key thing about this new framework is that it is kind of unusual insofar as it is effectively leading edge. We are at the forefront here. We're the first ones in Europe to establish a framework like this. We're the first ones in Europe in the public sector to actually successfully gain access to remanufactured notebook computers through a framework, through a central arrangement. So it's the first time that I've come across in my 8 odd years here, or 6 odd years, sorry, in the public service, is the first time I've come across a leading edge project rather than a following project.
Can you explain to the audience, Fergal, what your drivers were for adding remanufactured notebooks to a framework?
Sure. We've been doing, in the ICT portfolio of OGP, we've been developing central arrangements for desktop and notebook computers since 2016. We're currently on our 4th iteration of such frameworks. And in designing that framework and doing the market research and in designing the framework, we were on the lookout for ways in which to improve the environmental characteristics of what we did. And during the course of that investigation and the market research, we understood that the market was in a position to offer remanufactured laptops. Refurbished laptops or notebooks have been around for some time, but there's a key difference between refurbished and remanufactured in that refurbished is basically checking out the device, replacing any bits that appear to be broken, and putting it back on the market with a 1-year warranty. With remanufactured, it's a whole different ballgame. There's up to 360 steps, I believe, in Circular Computing's own process to remanufacture the device, which takes the components basically and remanufactures them to a standard which is as good as or better than new. Casings are polished, screens are polished and brought up to standard, batteries are checked. And we are talking about a whole different standard, which is verified through a British kite mark standard in terms of the quality and the durability and the longevity of those remanufactured devices compared to refurbished. It took us 3 iterations to actually establish the framework. We were learning as we went along. We understood there were multiple players in the market, and indeed there are multiple remanufacturers out there, but not many of them offer remanufacturing on a commercial basis. So we have finally settled on a single supplier framework. And the current scope is for remanufactured notebooks only, but we will be looking further down the line. We will be looking, as we always do, to see if we can improve the environmental characteristics and features of what we do, and try and improve matters from, in terms of the circular economy. And this is where we've been working with Niall on this framework, and hopefully on future initiatives as well, to try and ensure that we address the circularity and the I suppose, to reduce the amount of electronic waste, which is in the thousands of tons every year in Ireland. If we can do our bit to try and help that, we're on the right track with regards to the environment.
And how important was the cost argument? So what I mean by that is if people are looking to get into, say, the electric vehicle world, or they're looking to renewable energy, sometimes they have to pay a premium to push the green agenda. How does this framework help the target audience with the economics?
Unusually, for an arrangement or for a contract or for a type of product which is green and environmentally friendly, the products under our framework are, generally speaking, as cheap as or cheaper than the new equivalents. So it's kind of an unusual situation. You're dead right, Steve. Normally there's a premium to be paid for the likes of EVs, but these devices, which are, as I've already mentioned, produced to a standard as good as or better than new, actually come at a very competitive price. And that's really important in the public sector, where value for money is a key feature for us. So the combination of quality and price means that anybody availing of the notebooks through this framework will be getting a very high quality device, which is a premium device, at a very, very competitive price.
And I remember speaking to a member of the team who was saying that the framework was for common goods and services to provide products to 80% of the target audience. Clearly, there are going to be some users within the target audience where only cutting edge devices will be the flavor of the day, who need the absolute raw power.
Yeah, I guess for us, the 80% benchmark would apply to the majority of civil and public servants who use their notebook for web browsing, whether it's on their intranet or wider in the internet, for using the Microsoft Office product, whether it's for Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Visio, all those various other Microsoft products, and some other apps as well, which would be maybe unique to different departments or local authorities or different public bodies. like these machines they're not specifically geared for the likes of computer aided design applications or other heavy usage applications. But you know what? The regular brand new machines that we supply under another framework that we also have, they're not suitable for that either, and we always have to go for a higher end product with very specific specifications and requirements set out by the clients in those regard in regard of those machines. So I guess what we have within this framework is a number of devices which will actually facilitate civil and public servants to do 80% of what they need to do. Even the communicating on Teams, it's all of those normal features, or WebEx or any of the other e-communications facilities. Everything that we would normally do as standard is facilitated on those machines, and facilitated easily, I guess, is the thing as well. They're powerful enough to cope with all of that demand without stress and without suffering any performance issues.
Great. We can come back to that. Thank you, Fergal. Niall, in terms of the Green Public Procurement Strategy and Action Plan, sustainable production and consumption, the circular economy is a key theme. Could you expand on that and describe why that's important?
Sure, Steve. I mean, the basis of it is we need to move to a more sustainable production and consumption model, right across society, and that happens by changing how we consume materials and resources, how we design the products that we use, and how we extend the productive life of all goods and products, both in our society and in our economy more broadly. And so the circular economy, it offers that alternative to what's traditionally been the linear model of production and consumption that helps us move towards a more circular future and sustainable future. And obviously it's identified by ourselves and across Europe that one of the most important areas of the economy that can play a key role in helping us to become a more resource efficient and circular economy is through green public procurement. I mean, the government annual public sector purchasing accounts for 10 to 12% of our GDP, which is a very significant part of economic activity and demand. So it puts us in a really strong position to significantly influence and stimulate the provision of more resource efficient and less polluting goods and indeed services and works within the marketplace. And again, this is recognised internationally as an effective means for public administrations to manage the balance between cost effectiveness, which we've touched on already, and sustainable development, which this framework is all about. So in summary, the public sector it's got a huge responsibility to promote green procurement, and that's required in order to support our environmental and our wider sustainable development objectives. And our people, our citizens, they need to be sure that what's purchased on their behalf has minimal harmful effects on the environment and society, and at the same time that these goods and services represent both short-term as well as long-term value for money. So in the context of developing the GPP, we recognise that we need to leverage and to use public spending really strategically to support circular business models as well as the supply chains, and alignment between public procurement policies and circular economy principles has often, in the past been insufficient, and we're seeing some of these barriers. Public spending has been, again, traditionally largely directed towards traditional linear models, sometimes due to entrenched or traditional procurement practices and to be honest, a lack of awareness of circular alternatives. So that budget of about 100 billion a year available can be used, as I said, as a strategic tool to create a market and generate demand for circular goods and services, and supporting circular business models as well as supply chains. And I think, positive progress is really being made in the direction, and the establishment of this 30 million euro public sector framework for purchasing remanufactured laptops is really an excellent example of what can be done.
I think when I was thinking about the meeting today, I wrote this statement down. The Irish government have chosen the fastest, most simplest thing to do with the greatest probability of success. In other words, laptop technology is really well known for being linear. You take it, you use it for 3 or 4 years, and then you replace it. And often that replacement that strategy is centered around a finance provision, perhaps. So it might be they get given some money for 4 years, they write it off over 4 years, and then they go and purchase again. So I think what's interesting with this particular framework is is it's challenging existing systems and business models. Now, the adoption of it obviously is going to be the next challenge, because it's about the education and moving people away from a place of comfort. Fergal, that kind of brings me back into the conversation I wanted to have with you about the due diligence that you did and the views on the warranty that the target audience may be fearful of.
Yeah, I think there's even before we went to the market with the tender, which was ultimately successful, we were aware of the kind of features which were available with the remanufactured laptops. But in executing our due diligence, following the conclusion of the tender, but before the award of the contract, we learned an awful lot more. I think it's fair to say we were perhaps somewhat naive going into this, thinking, yeah, it's a great thing to do, but we weren't really aware of the huge benefits actually that are arising from it. So our due diligence focused in a number of areas. First of all, the technical capability of the machines that were being produced and were going to be part of the framework. We had set specifications which were to a high level, but we did further investigation to understand more about the remanufacturing process, what was involved, and actually the types of machines which were coming back into use for second life. And we began to understand that the specifications of the machines were very high specifications. We have 10th generation Intel chips, typically i7 chips being provided. So they are as performant, 10th generation i7 is as performant as a 13th generation i3 or i5 chip. So we're not suffering in any way, shape or form in terms of performance. We also focused on the credentials of the remanufacturing process and organization in terms of the standards that were being applied to make sure that the devices were as good as new or better. We did site references, obviously, including in the UK with references of more than 1,000 devices, including the ambulance service and Kent County Council. We're also aware of the fact that the Department of Defence in the UK uses the remanufactured devices from circular computing. And given that they're very security conscious, probably some of the most security conscious people in the world, we were able to satisfy ourselves that the security of the devices, which is always a concern, was second to none. We also confirmed that circular computing is a member of the UN Global Compact, that they could produce the devices in the volumes required. And that also, and a very, very sensitive thing for us to manage, is that there was no conflict between what circular computing were doing and the enterprise class OEMs that we currently have relationships with, because we didn't want to jeopardize that relationship with. There's always going to be a market there for new devices until such a time as the circular economy has gone full circle and we actually start to remanufacture everything and waste nothing. But that's some time away. So for now, we need to make sure we have good relationships with those providers of new devices as well. So all of those elements were put into our due diligence, combined with information that we were provided with about there's a 3% failure rate associated with these manufactured devices over 3 years, compared with an average of 15% in the industry. There's a 8 to 8, 5 days a week service desk, exactly the same as we have with our new devices. There's a 1-year warranty with all batteries, exactly as it is with new devices. There's a no quibble warranty up to 5 years. At the time we went to the market, that was 3 years. It's been extended to 5 years, which shows us the level of confidence that the remanufacturer has in their product. 2 years comes as standard. There's a nominal fee for the additional 3 years. So basically, we were able to put our hands in our hearts, and we to this day we're able to put our hands in our hearts and say that the products that are coming through that remanufactured framework are as good as the new devices that we're procuring elsewhere. And we were only able to satisfy ourselves following the due diligence process that would be the case, and that we could actually speak about that with confidence. I hope that answers the question, Steve. So it's a very long-winded way of answering a very short question.
No, that's great. And I would like to actually, without any promotion, I would like to explain that the on-the-ground support in Ireland is offered by an organisation called Green IT, who's part of the consortium that Circular Computing is also a member of. So the warranty is provided by them pre pre-market or pre-sales. There are samples available to try and make sure the audience is confident with the product before, like a try before you buy kind of environment. So we understand that the OGP have really created the framework for the public sector to move, and we will be compliant with each individual client to make sure that they're confident that they can make the move from a traditional model to a new one. And not everybody is our customer. I think it's fair to say that, as we've said before. So we too want to make sure that the OEMs upon whom we rely, we do HP, Dell, Lenovo, and we have great relationships with the OEM. We rely upon them to design product first life to be remanufacturable. Not every asset has the integrity of a second life. So the devices that we put through the framework are of a enterprise grade. Excuse me. Niall, in terms of what is most important from DEC, is it waste? Is it reducing the carbon? Is it kind of preserving water? What things are priority within the department?
It's all of the above, Steve. It absolutely is all of the above, because as we learn increasingly from the research and analysis we're undertaking of our waste management system here, of our climate, of our emissions profile, it's all interrelated. And where you have high levels of consumption, they are closely coupled with our carbon emissions. So and I think you've got a slide that you might be making available to the audience today, which demonstrates the actual carbon savings, the water savings, etc., associated with choosing a remanufactured device under a framework such as this, is really, really compelling, and it probably makes the case better than any presentation that I could make. But in terms of where this sits in the overall framework of what we're trying to achieve in our transition to a circular economy, it's really, really exciting. And it probably has already overtaken what we had envisaged when the Green Public Procurement Strategy was being developed, where there are targets there under, I think it's sectorial target T5 for ICT, which speaks about a minimum of 80% of ICT end user products procured by public sector bodies under new contract arrangements certified, which would be basically refurbished or be remanufactured. And I just think it's really, really exciting at this point. We've only published our strategy in March. To see the framework like this being delivered at this point, which really meets all of our objectives in terms of, as you rightly pointed, our waste generation in the first instance. Our profile in terms of waste and electronic equipment our footprint is really, really high in this space, and it's a key priority for us to work with extended producer responsibility schemes in terms of managing that at end source. But at the end source, it's not really what we're talking about circularity here. We're talking about at the design stage as well. So in the context of the products being offered in this framework, it's absolutely circular. It absolutely fits in with all our objectives across the key environmental criteria, and we're really hopeful of a strong uptake, Steve.
That's brilliant. I think what's really interesting, and the way that the government have gone about their business. Don't forget, we have two different departments operating not independently. There's a collaborative piece in the middle here. Is that we're kind of, not we, but you are carving a path from which the other actors in the industry can follow. It's about product design, it's about product use, it's about circularity, it's about minimizing the footprint from both carbon, waste and water resources, obviously. And also it helps, I think, create a direction of travel for other categories within the OGP, Fergal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our Bible, when we're procuring, our Bible for environmental characteristics to include in our procurements is the EPA GPP criteria. There is a specific criterion in there around remanufacturing, and we try always in every ICT procurement we include the maximum number of GPP criteria that we can to try and ensure that we're meeting those objectives you just spoke about. It's really important to us that all of our central arrangements have an optimal level of environmental recognition, I guess, in them, and the GPP criteria are well set out for that. We do other things as well outside of the GPP. We're not constrained by them, but we do reference them regularly. And I guess in particular with this one, and Niall referenced it with regard to this particular framework, and just some numbers here that people might be interested in. Anybody hasn't seen them before. Over the lifetime of the contract, we expect to save 19 million kilograms of carbon, which is equivalent to taking 7,000 cars off the road for a year. 72 million kilograms of mined resource preservation. In other words, that's 72 million kilograms of resource that hasn't been taken out of, sorry, not the resource that's used in the devices themselves, but the actual waste to gain access to those precious materials that are included in the devices themselves. That's the equivalent of 240 jumbo jets or an aircraft carrier. And finally, anybody who's familiar with the Vartry Reservoir in Wicklow, which provides a lot of the drinking water for Dublin, we will save, if, again, subject to the framework meeting its targets, we'll save 11 billion litres of water, which is the equivalent of the entire Vartry Reservoir.
It's incredible.
They're staggering numbers. Even on a per device level, the numbers are impressive. But when you roll it up to what's involved in the whole framework over 4 years, the numbers are quite staggering. And just in terms of take-up, because again, Niall, you referenced take-up there, and you hope to see a strong take-up. We're hoping for a strong take-up as well. And to date, over 40 public bodies have signed up to this arrangement. We have over 1,000 devices drawn down in the first 4 months. There was none drawn down in the first month. There were 40, I think, or 80, sorry, drawn down in the second month. In the low hundreds by the third month, and now we're up to 1,000 by the fourth month. So we can clearly see an upward trajectory here, an upward curve in terms of the level of drawdown. So according as, you know, events like this will help to raise awareness and to promote it, but according as people become more aware and more familiar with this arrangement, and according as word of mouth will spread as well about the quality of the devices, the suitability and the price point that they're aimed at as well, we expect that level of take up to increase significantly month on month for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, we think we've spoken before about it, but the COVID period, the pandemic, it was like it's almost 5 years ago now, as we approach the new year, and we possibly see a surge on demand coming in the next 12 months, both for brand new, which will serve that framework, but equally for the remanufactured framework. And for us, we knew it was going to be a steady path to lift off, and I'm glad about that, because it's given us a chance to get ourselves into the right shape, ready for the market. So we're doing roadshow and tells and getting around and speaking to people to make sure that they're aware of what the alternatives are to what they have. But do you think that procurement maybe I'm being bashed on the head with a green stick, or do we feel that the presence of this framework and it appealing both sides, both from a public expenditure point of view, it's a reduced cost, and also reducing its footprint, is something that's going to be adopted by procurement guys?
Yeah, I think, procurement gets a lot of bad press, and public procurement gets even worse press than it does in the private sector. It's always seen as an obstacle. Why can't you just let me buy whatever I want? We're not a police force. We're not the custodians of the pure procurement regulations, but we do where we can add value, and we do where we can try and identify the best value for money when it comes to serving the public service in general. And in this arrangement, I think you're right, Steve. We've hit a nice balance of quality and price. We know that the product will be available at sufficient quantities to meet the full demand under our framework. It's not without its problems. There will be people always who look at remanufactured devices and say, how can we ensure consistency of product? How can we ensure we're getting the right volume of the same model so that we can do our imaging correctly? How can we make sure that they're secure? How do we know that there aren't bad actors involved in the remanufacturing process? We've all read about the pagers and the walkie-talkies in God help the poor people in the Lebanon. But so there's always, people are always fearful about engaging with something which is new and unknown. And I guess part of our work in order to promote the framework and make sure that that the environmental benefits that are accruing from using this framework are well understood, along with the features and functions of the devices themselves, which are secure, which are performant, which do come with a warranty, and they do come with exactly the same levels of service or better as the new equivalents.
Thank you. Niall, in terms of accountability, we talked about this, about the new reporting that's coming through, the requirement to get that right. In procuring product, any product that has an environmental tick, if you like, how are public sector bodies going to be held accountable to their decisions?
Sure. Well, certainly the EPA, I mean, they published their third report, I think it was, on GPP procurement activity in government departments. I think that was at the end of April. And that report details that out of, I think it was over 920 million euros spent on contracts greater than the 25,000 euro signed in 2022, just 34% of the spend, included green criteria, which I guess demonstrates, that the use of green criteria is inconsistent across government departments, and we have to recognise at that particular point in time it was a low level relative to total spend. And I think it's also important to note that procurement is significant across the entire public sector, not just government department levels. And therefore, there's a need to establish a broader reporting mechanism across the public sector to track implementation of GPP in a uniform and a coordinated manner. And we all public bodies, we all have responsibilities and actions associated with those under the climate action plans. And Climate Action Plan 2023 contains a commitment to annual reporting and monitoring on GPP by government departments, and that the supporting structures will be identified and guidelines developed for public bodies. And I know to deliver on this commitment, the GPP strategy and action plan requires all public bodies to report on GPP implementation. We're also in DEC, we're currently considering the legislative basis, to mandate reporting of GPP by public bodies. In other words, to legally require the reporting on the use of national green public procurement criteria in order to demonstrate, absolute transparency in implementing GPP in line with the comply or explain approach. And I think we're working with OPC in relation to drafting the relevant head of bill for an environmental miscellaneous provisions bill to be introduced before the end of the year. And I think that sends a really strong message, as much as anything else, in terms of accountability across the public sector, Steve.
I like the fact that there are guidelines, there's help available. There is definitely a transition happening, but we're not going from it's not an on-off switch. It's a transition that we're going through, and it's nice to feel that we're not putting people's feet on the fire. There's guidelines, there's going to be hand-holding, there's going to be support, but ultimately the change is happening, and it's important that people recognise that they need to get on board with that, I think.
Absolutely, Steve, and I think this framework is an excellent opportunity to do so. Virgil has gone through the environmental impacts that this framework potentially can play. I've spoken about how it fits into the overall context of the circular economy that we're trying to establish here, and in that regard, and I mentioned remanufactured and the remanufacturing process. It's a great story for the circular economy, because what you're getting is as good at or better than you. We're getting away from this second-hand type stereotype that people might have, and we're really at the cutting edge here. And in that context, as I said, I think this is a really good opportunity for public sector bodies to get on board in the GPP strategy here.
Brilliant. So I've just been told we're going to move into the Menti. There's in the Q&A tab at the top. There's a link to the menti.com page. Hopefully everybody can get there.
A very good point has just been made to me here by a colleague that sustainability is, while it's featuring higher than mobility and availability, and it's slightly ahead of reliable and stable supplier, it's way behind operational efficiency and budget. And part of the reason for that, and I'm open to correction on this, but I think part of the reason for that is because people have an expectation when they come to an OGP framework in particular that there's already an element of sustainability built in. So all of the devices that we have already been qualified as certified as EPEAT Gold or TCO certified or remanufactured, which is aligned to that T5 requirement, Niall, in the ICT section of the strategy and action plan. So there is an expectation, I think, that ICT products which are procured under the framework are already sustainable to a certain extent, which allows people, I guess, the latitude to focus a bit more on budget and performance and try and get the most out of what they have without worrying too much about the environmental piece, which I wouldn't be so complacent as to say we've looked after all of it, but we've certainly gone some way down the road of making sure that our products are sustainable.
Yeah, that's a good point made. Thank you. So this is really interesting, and also not surprising, to be honest. Where we spoke before, Niall and Fergal, about second life being second best, or this sort of thing. I think the approach for sustainability to win has to be where the user is not being asked to compromise as if they were buying a brand new device, and that's certainly the position that we've taken in building out our business, and pretty much why we believe that standards are so very important for people in the public sector, especially in the public sector who have a responsibility to public funds, is to work with third parties to make sure that the supply chain, if you think of it like that, is resilient and it's robust, and it's not delivering a tired solution to the buyer.
Yeah, I think there's some of the three main concerns here appear to be lack of clear definitions, lack of known suppliers, and concerns about product quality. I already mentioned earlier on about the failure rate. I can't remember the acronym for it, Steve. NPK is it? But
RMA.
The RMA. There you go. I don't know where they got NPK from, but anyway, there you go. Yeah. So I mean, at 3% over 3 years compared with 15% for brand new devices that are produced by the three enterprise class OEMs, I think. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. It's only as we have a number of public bodies engaging through the framework with the remanufactured devices and actually confirming that those claims that are made are correct, that we'll really begin to get confidence around the quality of the product. But the stated failure rate is 3% compared to 15%. It's been measured and it's been certified. So we take it on faith for the moment, but we will, as I say, eat the pudding and prove it as we go along. Lack of known suppliers. I guess Green IT is familiar to many already in Ireland as a reseller of refurbished devices and now remanufactured as well. And I think circular computing is a name that's going to become more familiar and more of a household name across the public service in Ireland as well, according as this framework gains traction. And the last one is lack of clear definitions around sustainable solutions. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. We struggled actually to define what a remanufactured device might look like. And it was only when we delved into the NIST definitions and UN definitions and looked in various other areas for definitions of what remanufactured really means and what the benefits were, that we began to get a good handle on this. It's to be honest with you, it's not for the faint-hearted. It took a long time for the procurement team here to get a good handle on it. This is gaining huge traction across Europe, and I guess it's part of the title of the presentation as well. What we're doing has proven difficult across Europe to do as well. We are at the moment we have a sort of an association with CFIT. We're not active members yet, which is the Circular and Fair ICT Pact, which is a pact related to the procurement of mobile computing devices in particular across Europe. It has an extensive membership across Europe, and at a conference recently, our colleagues in different jurisdictions expressed an enormous interest in attempting to put similar arrangements in place as we have just done. They have found it difficult to do so. So as I say, it's not for the faint-hearted. There's a lot of effort that goes into this. So the lack of clear definitions is something that we think we've addressed to a large extent within this framework. We have defined what remanufacturing means. We have defined the standards that we want. We now understand exactly where the remanufacturer is in terms of its obligation to its staff, anti-slavery policies, so all of the, not just the green, but also the social aspect of that sustainability confidence that we're gaining has been explored to a very significant degree by ourselves. And we're more than happy to share that with our colleagues across Europe as well, but it has taken time and effort to get there. We've had to be persistent, I would say, to try and make that happen.
I think that's a kind of a really good place to jump into some Q&A, if that's okay. So I've got a question here. So I'm interested in the whole offer and concept, but will you be able to provide comprehensive usage data from customers that have had products in place for months or even years? So I guess on the one hand, I could answer that with, you mentioned earlier in the due diligence and the build-up phase of the framework, you went out and spoke to people who had been early adopters of remanufactured devices and spoke to them independently of anybody, Fergal?
Yes, correct. Yeah. Yeah, and we in fairness and to the best of my knowledge, nobody had any serious concerns or any issues which would cause us any concern.
I've got a note here. Does this tender framework consist of a buyback process?
Nope.
At all?
No, not at the moment. However, and again, I did say earlier on that we're not resting on our laurels with this one and saying we've done this and now we're finished. We've done everything we can for the environment. We will be looking further, and that will include how we dispose in a more environmentally friendly manner of all electronic equipment, not just laptops. And we will be investigating how we might reasonably and at a practical level put some sort of arrangement in place to make sure that we're putting the equipment that we have, whether it's first use or second use, back into the circular economy for further consideration, further use if possible.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, and actually this is a really, as I said earlier, it's the fastest, simplest thing to kind of get going with, and then try and figure out the other components around how you can help the total cost of ownership and life cycle, management. It will bolt on to this if you wanted it that way.
Yeah, it's one piece of the puzzle, Steve. I think you're right, and it was based on all the research that we had done, it was definitely the most straightforward piece to put in place. But that's not to say we're stopping here. We're not.
No. It's a sort of a question. Do people complain AI support such as Copilot needing the latest processor? Is that going to be a thing? So I guess AI strategy within the public sector is the comment.
Yeah, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, Copilot works okay on the 10th generation chips, which are currently available. So it's not an issue for today. We are aware of the market moving more towards sort of Snapdragon chip technology with integrated graphics and AI capabilities. I don't know how quickly the public service in Ireland will adapt to that. I'm not sure how enthusiastic we are about incorporating AI into everything that we do and making everything that we have and everything that we say and everything that we write available to somebody somewhere who may or may not have our best interests at heart. So I'm not sure how quickly we're going to embrace all of that. For now, based on existing demand and technical requirements, the remanufactured devices will certainly meet the majority of public service requirements.
Yeah, I think from our end, it's I spoke to somebody in central government recently, and they said, "What is your AI strategy, Steve?" And I was minded to just say, "Well, before I answer that, can I ask what your AI strategy is?" And he said, "Well, we haven't really got one. We're doing pilots around here, there, and everywhere, but we don't really have a proper central usage case right now." And I was like, well, we can adopt the same approach. You can think of us, if you think that we're a latent technology, AI is coming, and we need to make sure that we're ready for it. But we might argue that perhaps if one is being asked to buy AI on board and spend that extra money without knowing what they can use it for, they're over specifying the devices, maybe. That isn't going to happen probably until this time next year, or maybe in 2020, early 2026, but we can see that coming. And as a remanufacturer, we have to prepare ourselves, because ultimately in 3 years' time, when we're getting that core product back in for remanufacturing, that will be our core product. It will have AI on board. So we need to kind of figure out how we work with that. But right here, right now, Copilot can work perfectly fine with product you have on your desktop today. So yep. we can work with that. I have a question actually, which is actually quite relevant, I think. Do you think you're going to get any pushback from staff not getting a new device? So if they're used to getting new, is there a stigma attached with them having perhaps a second-hand device?
Yeah, I think probably in particular, Niall, I'll let you join in on this one as well, but probably in particular from people who are maybe the youngest in the family and are fed up with hand-me-downs. Yes, I can absolutely see where people would be reluctant in the first case to be given a remanufactured device. But you know what? If they're prepared to take that device with an open mind and establish whether or not it actually does the job for them, I think they'll be pleasantly surprised. But you can't force people to accept stuff. You have to prove to them that it's capable of doing the job. And I think people will be very, very, very pleasantly surprised if they are skeptical.
And a follow-on question then comes in: where can I go to check them out? So part of the application process, as I remember, was having a sample pool available for people to sort of test before they made any buying decision. Was a central part, not a central part of the procurement program, but it was part of the tender, as I remember.
Yeah, we have some sample devices here that we got obviously to see, first of all, that they looked and felt like new, but secondly to make sure that all of the gizzards inside in the device were what they said they were in terms of the chipset, the memory, etc. So yeah, I can confirm we even have a device here which is half and half. It's half refurbished in terms of the casing, and it is stark the difference between what the original sort of 3 to 4 year old device looks like and the remanufactured half of it. It's kind of interesting. Niall, I think you were going to jump in as well on the last.
I was just in terms of the perception, I guess. I mean, putting a second-hand product in somebody's hands. I think Minister Smith made a really good point at the Circular Economy Conference last week, where indeed Green IT presented and were very positively received, particularly by the Commission. In terms of perceptions are changing, we have a job of work to do in the department in terms of helping those perceptions to change. And I know we're running a national circular economy communications campaign at the moment, just to highlight the benefits of keeping stuff in use for longer. And Minister Smith made the point that at this new generation, they're comfortable with that concept. They're on board with it. They don't need to own everything. They don't need to be persuaded that something brand new is as good as something which has a more environmental and sustainable footprint. So you can actually turn it into a positive. And I know myself, colleagues across the circular economy division are very keen to access the framework and to have a remanufactured laptop. And I've been at international conferences previously where I have had experience of dealing with colleagues from different countries, and they have that. It's almost like they're walking the walk apart from talking the talk. And certainly, I think, as the public sector leading by example, I think it should be a badge of honor, if anything, to have a remanufactured laptop. And I think we have a job of work just to continue our own communications campaigns to actually to get that message across. Thanks, Fergal. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Niall. There's a question here about warranty and warranty provision. For instance, is screen damage covered under warranty? So we always, as an organisation, sit client side with our supply chain partner, which is Green IT. If there's a problem in use, we'll try and identify the problem. If it's a production issue, then like Fergal said, there's a no quibble swap out next day for a new remanufactured device to the desktop or to the staging partner. If it is a customer-induced damage problem, we will listen to the customer, because our view is that if we're able to provide a better service provision post-sale, that's something that we should embrace for the sake of people getting on board with the circular economy and remanufactured devices. We feel we have to go that extra yard and move away from it's a commodity sale. So as a business, we take the after-sale part really seriously, and the majority of the customers who work with us have become very sticky. They appreciate that we have problems every now and again. It's not about the problem, it's about how you fix the problem and manage the human part of the relationship. So there was that question. There's also a question about MOQs, which is, can I buy 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000? The principal idea with remanufacturing and the consistency of product, we have a very narrow range. We do HP, Dell, Lenovo. We have 3 or 4 models from each of those manufacturers that we remanufacture. And typically we work with organizations that have a like a refresh strategy. So some will go at it with I want to buy 1 here and 10 here and 5 there, and we can accommodate that from stock. And we can accommodate up to 100 units in stock. We have enough in stock. Those organizations that have 500 or 1,000 devices, generally to manage the refresh is a strategy that doesn't happen sort of next day. It will be a phased in approach. So if a customer has 500 devices, they might choose to replace, I don't know, 100 every other week or something like that, because the rollout and managing the people part of that rollout is intense. So we would welcome any conversation that anybody in the public sector has to listen to their needs, and we'll marry a provision to their needs. But we have customers with 6,000-7,000 devices, so an MOQ in the context of the Irish public sector is really within the realms of this framework and can be delivered upon. And this is the template for Europe. And do you think Europe will follow, Fergal?
I mentioned this earlier on, Steve. Whether they actually follow or not, there's a huge amount of interest. There's a number of jurisdictions have already been mentioned to me. I think is it Belgium, Norway, France, Switzerland, the Netherlands. So just to name a few. So they're interested in looking at our model and either replicating or doing something analogous to it, and they're actively looking at that at the moment. So will Europe follow? I'd like to think so, because I think this is good. It there's clear benefits to the environment. It's the first truly circular arrangement that we've put in place, and I think it's been recognised as such across Europe. And the Circular and Fair ICT Pact, the members of that, as the title would suggest, are very interested in the circular economy. And we're a case study has been done by CFIT, by that group, on this, which has been shared with members as well, and indeed probably been shared more widely as well.
Thank you. Listen, unless there's anything from yourself, Niall?
No, I was just going to wholeheartedly agree with Fergal there in the context of the European Green Deal, in the context of the new commission of commissioners, in the context of the commitment by the President of the Commission for a new Circular Economy Act in the coming years, the Draghi and Letta reports, which highlight public procurement and how to leverage it in terms of of Europe's competitiveness going forward. Critical raw materials. Absolutely, they're going to be following us in this space. And as I said, the presentation from Green IT with respect to this product was hugely well received by Commission representatives at the Circular Economy Conference last week. And CFIT are, as Fergal has said, the case study will be really, really impactful there as well. Thanks.
It's really important work. So look, thank you both so much for a really enlightening discussion. There's been some really wonderful examples and really practical advice, which I hope everybody on the call has benefited from. And finally, on behalf of myself, Circular Computing, our partners on the ground, Green IT, a big thank you to our guest speakers, Fergal and Niall, and most of all to everybody else who spent some time attending, and hopefully you got something from this session. But Fergal, Niall, from me, thank you so much for your support.
Thanks for having us, Steve. And if I might just mention before everybody disappears off the call, that if anybody wants more information on this, they can go to the OGP Buyer Zone. And if they have a login there, they can simply search for remanufactured, and they'll get some information on this arrangement. Or if they go to the Green IT website, I think it's under government, portal.greenit.ie, and I think it's under the government section in there. They'll find information as well about the available products.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.